to Black Marsh and its inhabitants. Next, we have the Hist, perhaps one of the most overlooked sentient species on Tamriel, and also arguably one of the most powerful. No doubt if you're an avid Elder Scrolls fan, you'll have come across the Hist before. They are fat-looking trees that the Argonians covet dearly. However, there is much more to these trees than meets the eye. The Hist are actually one of the oldest races, easily centuries older than the races of men or mer. Now, the Hist trees I mentioned are powerful, as they fundamentally work with their counterparts, the Argonians, and it's thought that the Argonians were actually created by the Hist. When Hist sap is consumed by Argonians, it fills them with increased battle prowess and gives them prophetic visions. These come in extremely handy and make the Hist a formidable opponent, as before the Oblivion Crisis, the Hist warned the Argonians of Lone Dagon's impending coming. When portals to Oblivion were opened, the Argonians stood ready, and it's said that the Argonians actually invaded Dagon's plains of Oblivion so ferociously that he was forced to close all his portals to Argonia, as the Argonians, with the help of the Hist, were too strong. So it's evident that the Hist possess more power and influence than any would first imagine, and it's said that the Hist act like a hive mind. They're all interconnected across Black Marsh and across Tamriel, and communicate with the Argonians when they feel they need to, if they perceive some sort of danger. The third species I'm going to be talking about is the Slode, widely considered to be one of the most hated species in Tamriel. And I just want to say quickly here that I did dedicate an entire video to the Slode and their island, Thas, last month, so if you want more information on them, definitely head over there. Now, the Slode are not present on mainland Tamriel. They instead inhabit Thas, a small chain of islands to the south of Tamriel. Although their exact geography is disputed, owing to the fact the islands seemingly morph in size and change places for no obvious reason. The Slode themselves echo this description of their homeland somewhat, as they are fundamentally fat balls of slime and goo that thrive in swamp-like environments, and no doubt their appearance adds to their detest among the major races of Tamriel. However, it's not their looks primarily that led to their hate, it's the actions they committed against the people of Tamriel. The Slode are described as vindictive necromancers, and in order to destroy the races of Tamriel, as is their wont for no particular known reason, they engineered the Thracian Plague, a plague so effective in its work it would decimate half the Tamrielic population. Understandably, the people of Tamriel wouldn't be too fond of them after that, and so they retaliated in force by invading Thas and killing many of its inhabitants, but the much hated Slode would live on. Next, we have an obscure race that inhabits the deadly ice fields of Akavir, and that has invaded Tamriel in the past for reasons known only to themselves. The Kamal are obscure in their nature, as they seem to attack any other race they come across for unknown reasons. In Akavir, when the snows thaw and they are released from their frozen prison, the Kamal immediately attack the three other races of Akavir, for no reason, as I said, and their invasions of the other Akaviri provinces are always unsuccessful. This leads one to wonder exactly why the Kamals systematically attack the other races each year unsuccessfully ad infinitum. However, one year, in addition to their normal attacks, the Kamal once invaded northern Skyrim, apparently in search for an item they called the Ordained Receptacle, which no one knows much about. Perhaps it's an item the Kamal think will aid them in their endless war, but who knows? The Kamal would never find this artifact, however, as a united force of Nords, Dunmer and Argonians, an unlikely alliance, would defeat their invasion force on the field. Well, little we do know about the Kamal comes from this invasion, as it's the only known contact the Tamrielic people have had with the Kamal. So as you can imagine, any information we do have is rather obscure and surrounded in mystery due to this one-time bloody event. Lastly, I'm going to mention a race that is pivotal to the very nature of Nirn, a group of ancient beings that are responsible for Tamriel, Akavir and all the other provinces of that world being around today. Of course, I'm talking about the Elnothi. The Elnothi are now, but not always were, aspects of nature and fundamental being, such as air and water, that maintain the world's very fabric. But they were not always so. The Elnothi are the precursors of all modern races, and most men, mer and beast folk can concur that they all came from the Elnothi, so they are all fundamentally united in their ancient origin. The Elnothi themselves are actually Et Arda, that is to say primal spirits that have been around since the universe's inception, that gave themselves and their power into the creation of Mundus, and so without their sacrifice, no species would even exist on Earth, as there would be no world for them to exist on. The Elnothi today exist, yes, as aspects of nature, but fundamentally they also exist through every single being that now lives and walks in Nirn, as all life stems from them. And so really, when we talk about the Elnothi, we're talking about the fundamental aspects of Nirn, as well as every single species that inhabits it. The original Elnothi are, as I said, aspects of nature, and they are called the Earth Bones, as they are the constant platform of the world on which everything else is built upon. Anyway guys, that's what I like to do. And I just want to say first top 5 video I've ever done, and I do realise that some aspects of the species mentioned are talked about rather briefly. I wanted to make this video as concise as possible so you weren't simply bombarded with facts. On my channel you can find loads more in-depth lore videos on a variety of subjects related to the Elder Scrolls if you're interested. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you. So hey guys, my name's Marty, and welcome back to another Elder Scrolls video. In the last video we counted down the top 5 unknown races of the Elder Scrolls universe. Today we're going to be counting down the top 5 deadliest villains in the Elder Scrolls. At number 5 we have the rather well known, but nonetheless evil Maroon's Dagon, the Daedric Prince of destruction, change, revolution, energy and ambition. Fitting is Dagon's satanic appearance, as the Prince of Destruction endeavours to create a literal hell on earth wherever he reaches. Dagon is easily one of the most evil entities of the Elder Scrolls universe, due to him being one of the most ambitious Daedra amongst the Daedric princes, which is hardly a good thing. The fact that he has actually attempted to invade Nirn and take it as his own numerous times. The most well known of Dagon's invasions is, of course, the Oblivion Crisis, which is one of the most traumatic and detrimental events to hit Tamriel and its people. Cities were burned to the ground and there were unimaginable deaths, and the actions of Dagon brought about the end to a royal and noble bloodline. But more importantly, in the crisis's wake, Dagon's actions led to the fracturing of the Empire, and by extension caused many of the wars that would come to follow, such as the Great War. Such evil and suffering was brought about wholly under Dagon's keen eye, and it is clear that Dagon was willing and is willing to commit great atrocities and other dangers. Of domination and enslavement, Molag Bala's best friend's son, as it is through his rape of a needed virgin that the born, and is well known by any of the Dawn Lines, the vampire such evil must be evil in himself. As well as creating vampires, Molag Bal has invaded the world as well, as well as educating Maroon's Dagon. Both invasions were he actually to merge his own plane hellish plane. Had he succeeded, there would be no Nirn as we know of today. Invasion was more sinister, as it would have resulted in a much more dire situation for the people of Nirn overall, as really, Nirn would not have existed as its own plane had Molag Bal succeeded. Such an evil outcome would have inevitably heralded the end of life on Nirn as we know it. Our next villain at number 3 is not a Daedric prince, but an elf. Surprising as it may be that an elf could surpass a Daedric prince in terms of evilness, I would consider Mankar Cameron one of the most heartless and evil people to ever set foot in Tamriel. And that's what it comes down to really, that Mankar Cameron was an elf who committed such obscene atrocities on his fellow races. In some ways this makes him 1,000 times worse than any Daedric prince. Mankar Cameron was an incredibly powerful mage who was skilled enough to construct his own plane of existence, and he was the leader of the Mythic Dawn, a group of fanatics who worshipped Maroon's Dagon and assassinated the second bloodline, resulting in the Oblivion Crisis. It is directly due to Cameron's activity that the crisis actually took place, as without inside help, so to say, Dagon would not have been able to conquer Tamriel at all. Worse than this, however, is the way Mankar Cameron actually treated his followers, who respected and revered him. He promised the Mythic Dawn members paradise if they died for his cause, a place of eternal peace, tranquility and rest. Mankar Cameron However, Mankar's realm was a place of torture and sorrow. All the souls that were trapped there after death were tortured endlessly in hunting games and Mankar Cameron chose the peace and tranquil side of his realm for himself and his family, taking pleasure in his underlings' eternal torture. The fact that Mankar Cameron has his own plane of existence and what it actually consisted of is very much the person he actually was. Clearly, he was extremely powerful and knowledgeable to perform such a feat, with help from Dagon, of course. But in addition, he was vindictive and selfish, willing to sacrifice the lives of his peers to a Daedric to gain yet more power. And whilst Cameron is undoubtedly evil, I can't help but as to stoop so low to renounce all morality and sense of companionship. So really, was Michael Cameron a person at all, at heart, or merely a manifestation of the worst Elvendom has to offer? Next we have Dagoth Ur, the main antagonist in the game, and immortal heir of Dagoth Ur was the first Dunmer to manipulate the elements tools in order to gain divine power, and with this godly power, he would commit various atrocities upon his people. One such atrocity that Dagoth Ur committed was his release of a terrible illness which would either attack an organism's essential organs, thus killing them painfully, and instigate various growths across the body which distorted one's structure and movement. The purpose of this disease was to simply weaken the hold the ruling parties of Morrowind had upon the province by destroying the people and the wildlife who lived there. And the fact that Dagoth went to pass in this manner, he would effectively put innocent people through torturous experiences to achieve their objectives. In addition to the blight disease, it was commonly thought that the slew the nobles over the dispute over the use of Kragnak's tools. As the story goes, Lord Nerevar had appointed Dagoth Ur to guard the powerful tools, whilst he sought counsel from the tribunal of Almalexia, Vec and Sophasil. Upon deciding that the tools were not to be used, he was eternally safe. Nerevar and the tribunal returned to Red Mountain to tell Dagoth Ur of their decision. The ensuing fight would see the end of Lord Nerevar, as he was mortally wounded by Dagoth Ur. Dagoth Ur, although greatly weakened, would live on to plague Morrowind again years later. That being said, whilst Dagoth Ur is undeniably evil, the tribunal was somewhat villainous as well, considering they would later give Nerevar's wishes and make themselves gods by harnessing tools power for their own will. There is some speculation as to whether or not the version of events I mentioned regarding Nerevar's death are correct, as something that was actually not Dagon. Nonetheless, none can deny that he was willing to jeopardize the lives of hundreds of thousands of people as he harnessed incredible power to make himself Morrowind's ruler. Lastly, we have arguably the most deadly villain and Daedric prince that exists within the Elder Scrolls universe. That is Jiggalag, the Daedric prince of order. He represents logical order and deduction, and has taken account of every detail of the world and every action that has ever taken place on Mundus or Oblivion, long before they actually happen. As a result, he believes in certainty and determinism, and that the concept of individuality is an illusion. He is actually so deadly alliance to stop him from dominating both Mundus and every realm of Oblivion. Even you know the Daedric Prince of Madness. However, this curse would not last forever, as after a few eons, Jiggalag would be free of this curse due to the actions of the hero of Kamarch in the Shivering Isles at the time of the Oblivion Crisis. As the Daedric Prince of Order, one might not think that this is evil or villainous at all, as surely order, being the opposite of madness, is a good thing. However, Jiggalag is incredibly powerful due to his perception of order, and if we define power as the ability to while all the Daedric princes have near infinite power within their own realms, Jiggalag was able to impose his rule upon others. Had the other over all the planes of existence, thus eradicating any sense of individuality and enslaving all the races for his own will. Whilst Jiggallag's intention may not be evil itself, as from his perspective, he was as his line of thought regarding loss of individuality goes against all principles held by the race of Mer, as well as the races of the beast, indeed other greater threats. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to take a look at my other lore videos on my channel. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you. So hey guys, my name's Varty and welcome back to another Elder Scrolls lore video. In this video we're going to be talking about exactly who or what the mystical Grey Fox is and what the Grey Fox is up to in the time of Skyrim. To begin with, the Grey Fox was the head of the Thieves Guild for some 300 years before his presumed disappearance. However, it's imperative to understand the Grey Fox is not a person, but rather a title that someone can assume. In times past, the title of Grey Fox was passed from leader to successor within the Thieves Guild by giving the Grey Cowl of Eternal to the successor. Since the successor then becomes the Grey Fox, many thought that he had been alive for over 300 years in the time of Oblivion. However, this would all change after the completion of the Thieves Guild questline in the Elder Scrolls 4. But before we get into who or what the Grey Fox is now, it's pivotal to understand what exactly the Grey Cowl of Nocturnal is, and why it was so important to the Thieves Guild for so many years. The Grey Cowl of Nocturnal was stolen from the Daedric Prince Nocturnal by a thief named Emma Dereleth, the first Grand Master of the Thieves Guild. Because Nocturnal is revered as the Mistress of Shadow, the artifact is attributed with immense stealth and secrecy which it passes on to the user. After the theft, Nocturnal cursed the cowl so that whomever wore it would be erased from history. All who knew that person would subsequently forget who they were. This caused Count Corvus Umbronox, otherwise known as the Grey Fox to the Thieves Guild, to lose his royal ties when he came into possession of the cowl. His wife Melona's memory of him fogged, and she suspected him of having run away, forsaking his marriage vows. And it should be noted this Count Corvus Umbronox is indeed the Grey Fox and Eternal Oblivion. Through his actions in this time period, a series of events would be instigated, leading to Nocturnal's Curse of the Cowl being unravelled, which would change the nature of the Thieves Guild forever. In the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, the player has the option to join the Thieves Guild, which is of course at that time led by the mysterious Grey Fox, who many at that time believed to be a myth, including most of the Imperial Legion. However, upon joining the guild and working your way up the ranks, the player eventually encounters this mysterious figure in the flesh. The Fox then enlists the player's help in stealing several items, ultimately to enable the theft of an Elder Scroll. And using this Elder Scroll, the Grey Fox is able to rewrite history, thus disbanding Nocturnal's curse. This would allow the wearer of the cowl to interact with other people as him or herself, and not as the Grey Fox, and thus take a more active role in the guild's interactions overall, while still retaining the artifact's immense stealth capabilities. After the curse had been obliterated, Corvus returned to his wife and his former position as Count of Anvil, and passed the cowl onto the Champion of Cyrodiil, that is to say, the player. However, the player, it is largely assumed, did not pass on the Cowl of Nocturnal, so the line of Grey Foxes ended with him, as fundamentally it is assumed the Grey Fox is still the player from Oblivion in the time of Skyrim, as he still has the cowl in his possession. But how could this be true? Surely the player would be dead of old age, or other means in the time of Skyrim, which takes place some 200 years later after the Oblivion Crisis. Fundamentally, what it comes down to is the simple idea that the player from Oblivion is no longer a person, rather a god. The protagonist from Oblivion mantled the title of the Mad God and Daedric Prince Sheogorath, who is the same Sheogorath we see in Skyrim, and as Sheogorath is a Daedric Prince, he is obviously immortal. And by mantling, what we mean is that the player acted in Sheogorath's place, so effectively during the early march of the Shivering Isles, as Sheogorath became Jiggalag in Oblivion, and left his space empty, so to say, the player actually became Sheogorath in body and mind, and thus the old Sheogorath stayed as Jiggalag, the Daedric Prince of Order, whilst the player assumed the form of Sheogorath. And so it's commonly thought that Sheogorath, that is to say the player from Oblivion, still has the Grey Cowl in his possession, meaning he is still the last Grey Fox. And we actually have some inkling of a confirmation that the Sheogorath seen in Skyrim is the protagonist from Oblivion. Sheogorath says to Pelagius the Mad, Sheogorath-related quest in Skyrim, that you are the best septon as ever ruled. Well, except that Martin fellow, but he turned into a dragon god, and that's hardly sporting. You know, I was there for the whole sordid affair. Marvellous time. Butterflies, blood, a fox, a severed head. In Oblivion, we know that it was Martin Septon's sacrifice that ultimately ended the Oblivion Crisis, and that the player worked closely with Martin to bring the crisis to an end. And we also know that the player was actually with Martin in his last few moments of life, before he turned into the aspect of a dragon to battle Mehrunes Dagon. So naturally the player would have held Martin in high esteem. like Sheogarth seemingly does here. Sheogarth also claims that he was there for the whole sort of affair, which is not typical of a Daedric prince, as they largely take little notice of the goings-on in the mortal realm. Thus, one could infer that the Daedric prince is actually the player from Oblivion, who would have obviously been present at the Oblivion crisis at the time. In addition, the cryptic mention of butterflies, blood, a fox, and a severed head could allude to events that took place in the time of Oblivion. These likely reference the beginning of the Shivering Isles quest, the Blood of Divine's main quest, the severed head of Matthew Bellamont's mother, and the grey fox of the Cyrodiil's Guild questline. These comments, coupled with Sheogarth's remark that the Mad God is a title that's passed from me to myself every few thousand years, suggest that he may indeed be the last grey fox, as he's the last known owner of the Cowl of Nocturna. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed. I've got lots of other cool lore videos on my channel which you can feel free to check out. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you. So here is my name is Marty, and today we're going to be asking ourselves, who is the strongest mortal within the Elder Scrolls universe? Of course, there's a diverse range of opinions on this matter, and often when it comes to defining what a mortal is in the Elder Scrolls, it can become slightly tricky. So for the purposes of this video, I'm only considering mortals who have not ascended to godhood and who are not undead. We won't be considering the likes of the Tribunal and the King of Worms. Incidentally, I want to make clear that this isn't necessarily a straightforward question to answer, as power in itself can come in many different forms. So the individuals I will be mentioning in this video will be ones who have exerted a vast influence on the course of events in Tamriel, or simply have strength, either magical force or physical. In this video I'll be mentioning two candidates I think constitute the two most powerful mortals in the Elder Scrolls. They are largely comparable in their magical power, so discerning who of this duo is the most powerful is rather difficult. Firstly, we have the renowned Telvanni wizard Fear, one of the oldest living mortals known to exist in the Elder Scrolls, estimated to be around 4,000 years old. He is so old in fact that he was born a Chimer, which is the race of the elves that preceded the Dunmer. With 4,000 years of experience, obviously this wizard is going to have knowledge most would scarcely dream of. He has travelled the plains of Oblivion and was once a member of the prestigious and extremely selective Psijic Order, before he left due to a disagreement with their doctrine. The Order saw him as a gifted youth in magic, knowledge and pursuit of truth. However, after a while joining the Order, he left and went back to Morrowind. He abandoned the so-called old ways and devoted his life to the study of the new ways, the ways of the Dwemer. His study of the ways of the Dwemer was no doubt aided through his interactions with the last living Dwemer, Yagrum Gagan, who happens to be Divath Fear's longtime friend, who Divath cares for in his corporasium. The knowledge that this Dwemer provided Divath was no doubt immensely beneficial, and one of the many feats that Divath Fear achieved, alongside his use of powerful magic to extend his lifespan, was the making of clones of himself. He had 4 so-called daughter wives, who were in fact female clones of himself. Arguably, this age-old Dunmer mage is one of the most powerful mortals to exist in the Elder Scrolls due to his immense and unparalleled arcane knowledge. However, it is not necessarily one's lifespan that dictates how powerful you can actually be, as whilst having thousands of years of experience is immensely beneficial, there are mortals far younger than the likes of Divath Fear who are similarly, if not more powerful than he. Riemann Cyrodiil could be one such person. This renowned emperor was the legendary ruler of the Second Empire of Tamriel, and he's best known for his actions in defeating the Akaviri forces that invaded Tamriel. However, Riemann, as well as devastating the invading forces, also convinced the surviving Akaviri to follow and effectively worship him due to his status as Dragonborn. In fact, it was the Akaviri who did the most damage to his standing as emperor, but Riemann himself never took the title in his lifetime. Riemann completely reshaped the face of Tamriel during his rule. He was able to conquer all the provinces, bar Morrowind, with relative ease, and he basically set the groundwork for the empire Tiber Septim would inherit. He created the province of Cyrodiil, as we know of today, and he created the Imperial Legion, which is the largest and most disciplined army of all time. But Riemann was not only powerful in the sense that he was a sensational ruler and an unparalleled tactician. Much of his power is speculated to come from his Dragonborn heritage, and in many ways Riemann was similar to Talos, particularly due to the fact Riemann was worshipped as a warrior god-emperor like Talos for hundreds of years. However, unlike Talos, we do not have any confirmation that Riemann is in fact a god, so most safely assume he was just an exceptionally talented and powerful man who was also Dragon. So we have the ancient, insanely powerful and knowledgeable Telvanni wizard Divath Fear, and a dragon-born emperor who changed the fate of Tamriel forever, and who was even able to turn a foreign and mysterious enemy into the builders of his empire. But who of these two is the most powerful, or are they simply as powerful as each other in different ways? If you have any thoughts whatsoever on this topic, then please feel free to post your thoughts in the comment section below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I myself would be more inclined to suggest that Divath Fear is a more powerful individual, but that Riemann Cyrodiil could exert more power through the use of his empire. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Okay, so hey guys, my name's Avarti, and today we're going to be talking about the Emperor Titus Mede II, and how his assassination at the player's hands may very well have saved the Empire from destruction. You should note that this video is one of speculation, and that the content of this video is not certified Elder Scrolls lore. However, the theory I will be presenting here does have sufficient evidence and logical thinking behind it to make it more than plausible. I would also like to give thanks to the Reddit user ScottSkin, who initially came up with this theory and allowed me to make a video all about it and elaborate on it, so a big shout out to him for letting me make this video. The events of the Dark Brotherhood questline are what this theory revolves around, but before we get into the actual theory concerning Titus Mede's assassination, it's necessary to understand the man himself and his backstory. When Titus Mede II ascended to the throne in the 4th era, year 168, he inherited a weakened empire. The glory days of the Septums were a distant memory. Valenwood and elsewhere were gone, ceded to the Thalmor enemy. Black Marsh had been lost to Imperial rule since the aftermath of the Oblivion Crisis, and Morrowind had never really recovered from the eruption of Red Mountain and Dragonfell. Additionally, Hammerfell was plagued by infighting between the Crowns and Forebears, so only High Rock, Cyrodiil and Skyrim remained prosperous and peaceful. The Emperor Titus Mede II had only a few short years to consolidate his rule over his rather meager empire before his leadership was put to the ultimate test. The Great War was the most vicious conflict Tamriel had ever seen, and changed the face of the continent forever. In short, at the beginning of the war, the Aldmeri Dominion were winning considerably, having invaded the heartland of the Empire and taken large swathes of land in Hammerfell. The Dominion had managed to overtake and occupy the Imperial city after the Emperor, Titus Mede, called a tactical retreat in face of superior numbers. Having abandoned the capital city, Titus and his generals gathered their forces and led a counter-attack in what would come to be known as the Battle of the Red Ring, a battle that would serve as a model for Imperial strategists for generations to come. Safe to say, due to the Emperor's immense tactical skill, the Empire was able to completely and utterly destroy the main body of the Aldmeri army in Cyrodiil. Soon after, a White Gold Concordant Treaty was signed, as both sides were depleted utterly, in which the Dominion and Empire agreed peace terms on the controversial condition that the Empire would collectively stop worshipping Talos. In addition, coastal lands in Hammerfell would be handed over to the Dominion. Safe to say, the Emperor became extremely unpopular after this treaty for many reasons. Mainly, many denizens of the Empire felt severe unease at this ban on Talos worship, particularly the Nords, whilst others believed they should have fought on against the Dominion no matter the cost. Nonetheless, it's true that in the time of Skyrim, Mede is pretty universally despised and became a scapegoat for a lot of the Empire's problems. The Emperor's name, in short, became a damaged brand, with all his successes ultimately overshadowed by his failures. And with another colossal war with the Dominion looming, this is not the sort of Emperor people are willing to be commanded by after the last disaster of a war. And this is where the speculation and theorizing starts. We can assume that everything we've mentioned about the Emperor's unpopularity amongst his subjects is known also to him, rather obviously. Titus knows that he cannot lead the Empire to victory in another war due to his past transgressions, so he needs to step down from the throne so a younger, more charismatic and celebrated leader can be followed. So there are a few options to do this. Titus could have easily just abdicated, leaving the throne to a younger heir, or alternatively, he could have committed suicide. However, I would argue that neither of these options would have really worked, as to do so would transfer suspicion to whatever heir he was on the throne. The son would inherit the sins of the father, as it were, in such dubious circumstances. Thus, only by his death at the hands of another could he ensure that his heir did not instantly inherit his tenuous political position, and could possibly garner the support required to marshal the empire against the Dominion. So, Emperor Titus II organised an assassination attempt on his own life, so that he could die a martyr and fuel the empire's drive in another war against the Dominion. In doing so, another, more young and capable leader would take the throne. There are several plausible reasons why this might be true, which I'll state here. The first one is to think about where the Emperor is actually killed in Skyrim by the player, a boat that's called the Kataraya. Despite the Emperor's body double being murdered in solitude early in the game, Titus Mede still sails there in defiance of all common sense and the pleading of his bodyguards, which are pleas rightly founded. When the player meets the Emperor in person, he simply states that he knows there's no stopping the Dark Brotherhood, which seems rather twisted logic, considering that in Oblivion, you are persistently told in the game that the Dark Brotherhood would never have dreamed of assassinating the Emperor in fear of dire retribution, and that was at a time the Dark Brotherhood was much stronger than it is in the time of Skyrim. In addition, there's the ambiguity of Armand Mottier's motives. Armand says that through Titus Mede's death, he will become more powerful within the Elder Council, but this seems a rather flimsy motive, considering Mede's age of 60 or 70 years old, so within the next few years, one would expect him to die of old age anyway. So why waste 20,000 gold on an assassination that doesn't really need to be done if the Emperor's going to die within the next few years anyway? There must have been another motive. In link with this theory, the motive could have been the fact that Mottier was probably one of the Emperor's most trusted advisors, and someone he knew could keep the conspiracy of his martyrdom a guarded secret. The Breton's increasing anxiety you can observe throughout the quest in Skyrim is not nervousness out of fear of being caught, but of avenging the death of his lord and close friend. But Mede couldn't take any chances despite this sense of closeness, and asked his assassin to kill Mottier before his death to tie up loose ends and ensure his secret goes to the grave. Hence Mottier's shock when you attack him. Mottier can be heard to be crying out, "We had a deal," before his murder, and this ambiguous statement could either refer to the deal between the Dark Brotherhood and himself, or the deal Mottier had with the Emperor concerning his murder. And so, Titus Mede II becomes a hero after his assassination, giving the Empire drive to fight against the Dominion in the looming war, and someone much younger and more suited for a prolonged war than Mede succeeds him, just as planned. In this way, Titus Mede II will be saving the Empire a second time from the Dominion, but in a starkly different way than first. Anyway guys, thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed the video. I've got lots of other cool lore and speculation videos on my channel that you can feel free to check out if you'd like to see more. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one. When you think of the Elder Scrolls, you instantly think of things such as role-playing, action, lore, fantasy and adventure. Understandably, as in each Elder Scrolls game, you play as a talented hero destined to save the world from one threat or another. Although there is no denying that the Elder Scrolls games can seem slightly odd at times, and there have been occasions where you can't help but think how high the developers must have been when they made these games. There have been lots of NPCs throughout the Elder Scrolls games who've been slightly special in their own way. So today we're going to be counting down the top 5 weirdest characters to be found in the Elder Scrolls. Number 1. Runs in Circles. Runs in Circles is an Argonian thief living in the settlement of High Cross in the Mad God's Plane of Oblivion, the Shivering Isles. Like all residents of this unhinged land, Runs in Circles has a certain derangement which, you guessed it, is a tendency to run in circles. However, Runs in Circles is more than just an insane Argonian, and believe it or not, she was placed in the game for a rather weird reason. The famous film Monty Python and the Holy Grail contains the trademark Knights of Ni, a band of raving knights who constantly repeat the nonsensical sound Ni. In the Shivering Isles, Runs in Circles can be witnessed circling her village, crying out this exact same phrase. So her presence is actually a throwback to the famously weird Knights of Ni. Number 2. Tarheel. This is perhaps one of the more well-known weird characters in the Elder Scrolls, famous for his ability to fly hundreds of feet into the air and then land and break his legs. In Morrowind, this peculiar wizard can be witnessed plummeting to his death near Seyda on the Bitter Coast, and is an icon of the randomness and silliness the Elder Scrolls has to offer. Nothing else is known about this mad mage, other than the fact if you do somehow save him from his fall, he'll be bitterly disappointed in his experiment and say that he doesn't want to talk about it. Number 3. Hamlin. Hamlin can be found inhabiting the tunnels beneath the Honningbrew Meadery, and this strange, skeever manipulating mage is an allusion to the famous Pied Piper of Hamlin, who removed the town of Hamlin of its rats, but after not being paid, led the children away just like the rats he got rid of. The Hamlin we can find in Skyrim is a more sinister incarnation of the famous Pied Piper, however, as this weird madman known by some as the Skeever King can be found breeding an army of venom-fanged skeevers to enact revenge on all those who wronged him, although before he can set his army of feral skeevers on anyone, he's thankfully prematurely killed by the Dragonborn, thus ending his ambitious plans to become the king of skeevers and bring death and destruction to his enemies. Number 4. Maik the Liar. Without a doubt, if you have played an Elder Scrolls game, you will know who this infamous Khajiit is. He can be found wandering the wilderness in each Elder Scrolls game, and wherever he is found, he loves to share his opinions with those he meets on a variety of weird and random topics, including children, Clovian fur helms, the companions, crossbows, dragons, fighting with one's feet, fish sticks, nudity, werewolves, and more. In fact, Maik is placed in each Elder Scrolls game by the developers to comment on new and scrapped features in each game, which to the average player simply sounds like odd remarks. For example, Maik's mention in Skyrim of "he has no need of mysticism" concerns the fact that mysticism, a magic spell type in Oblivion, is not present as its own form of magic in Skyrim. It was a scrapped feature. Number 5. The Adoring Fan. If I asked you to name an Elder Scrolls character who was a certified stalker and who had an evident back-rubbing fetish, I'm guessing you would either act puzzled or instantly suggest the Adoring Fan. Indeed, this little creepy gremlin of a Bosmer is perhaps the most annoying NPC to have ever graced an Elder Scrolls game. His exuberant greetings can range from him seemingly climaxing over Azura to him professing undying loyalty to the player.
By Azura, by Azura, by Azura! It's the grand champion! It's you standing here next to me.
Whilst this character is amusingly weird in his creepy cheerfulness, I think he would struggle to find a single player of Oblivion who didn't want to throttle this little elf at one point or another. Anyway guys, that's it for the weirdest characters in the Elder Scrolls, so thanks for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. I've got heaps of other cool lore videos on the channel that you can feel free to check out. Thanks again guys, and I'll see you. Throughout the ages, many mortals have achieved godhood in the Elder Scrolls. Talos became a god, Vivec became a god, Olmalexia became a god, and so did Sotha Sil. But what if I told you Maik the Liar became a god as well? I want to make it clear that the theory I am presenting in this video is very much a crackpot theory. It's widely speculative and most likely isn't true, but it's interesting to discuss and think about all the same. I'd also like to state the theory is not mine, but that of an awesome redditor named Alex Huntington, so thanks to him for allowing me to make this video. Maik the Liar has been present on Nirn for some 1,000 years, or at least an incarnation of him has. You see, Maik himself tells us that his forebears were all called Maik as well, which would suggest that Maik the Liar in Skyrim was indeed just one Maik of a long line of descendants of the Maik line. But this is ultimately unclear, and for the purposes of this theory, we're going to assume Maik is one being, and that he is indeed 1,000 years old. And the theory of Maik actually being one entity throughout the ages is supported by the odd tendency Maik developed in Oblivion of constantly searching for calipers at noon each day for some unknown reason. He seemingly carries on this tendency in Skyrim as he asks the player where he can find calipers. This would suggest at the very least that the Maik in Oblivion is the same Maik in Skyrim, or maybe all Maiks just have an unhealthy caliper fetish. Who knows? Now, if we accept Maik being 1,000 years old as truth, then this would instantly suggest that either Maik was an incredibly powerful mage or that he had achieved apotheosis. Arguably, achieving godhood would be more likely in this regard due to one quote that Maik says to the player in Skyrim. Maik can't remember his childhood, perhaps he never had one. Now this might seem a rather ambiguous statement, as surely everyone has had a childhood, and although we can't really remember our early formative years, no one's memory is that bad that they can't recall being a small child. However, there is one way to explain this confusing statement. We can use Vivec's story of achieving godhood as an example, as when he did achieve godhood, Vivec basically rewrote his childhood, so once he became a god, he had always been a god. Perhaps it's the same for Maik. In becoming a god, he was no longer longer his former self, and so all memory of his previous life faded. Maik also seems to possess an unprecedented amount of knowledge when it comes to the Elder Scrolls universe overall, which is fundamental to becoming a god in the first place. You see, for a mortal such as Maik to achieve godhood, one must achieve Kim, or Chim. Kim is fundamentally realizing your place in the universe or within the dream. But I won't go into the specifics of Kim in this video, as it's a very in-depth topic that requires its own, if not several videos to explain. Fundamentally, Maik seemingly has enough deep knowledge of the lore of the Elder Scrolls universe to achieve apotheosis in the first place. But why does Maik seemingly do nothing with his godhood? Vivek became a god king of his people, and Talos the god of mankind. So why hasn't Maik achieved a similar sort of status as being one of the leading figures in the world? Unlike them, Maik seemingly uses his godly powers to roam Tamriel, messing with adventurers and searching for calipers. So even if Maik has achieved godhood, we wouldn't be able to fully tell anyway, as he doesn't act like a typical god. Anyway guys, thanks for watching this video and I hope you enjoyed it. I've got lots of other cool lore videos on the channel that you can feel free to check out. Thanks again, and I'll see ya. The 9 provinces of Tamriel have continually fought and made peace with each other for hundreds of years, and will presumably continue to do so far into the future. The comings and goings of the various empires have unified the provinces for a time and secured peace, but always the continent descends back into its natural warlike state. In the 4th era, the era that Skyrim takes place, the continent is on the verge of unravelling yet again, with each province wrestling with internal and external strife. So which province in this time of immense upheaval is strongest in terms of military and economic power, if we ignore all allegiances and consider only each province within its natural defined border? I also want to say that this video is very speculative. There's a lack of solid evidence as to what the other provinces are like in the time of Skyrim, but we do have a pretty good idea. I'll organise the provinces in this video into 5 tiers. Bottom tier being the band of weakest provinces, then the next 4th tier being made up of the less powerful provinces, then 3rd tier consisting of stable, moderately powerful states, 2nd tier being made up of provinces that are very strong, and top tier being made up of effectively the superpowers of Tamriel. Beginning with the bottom tier, we have the homeland of the Dunmer, Morrowind, which I'm guessing comes as no surprise to anyone. Morrowind has come at the bottom of this list due to the disastrous event called the Red Year, which took place 200 years before Skyrim and yet still has a profound effect on the province today. The Red Year compromises the events caused by the meteor Bawadar crashing into Vivek City and destroying the nearby area. However, this meteor crash also inadvertently caused the eruption of Red Mountain, which destroyed the face of Vardenfell and killed thousands upon thousands of Dunmer. Cities and settlements across this expansive land were reduced to rubble, leaving Morrowind a shadow of its former self. However, to make matters worse, a year after this event, the Argonians of Blackmarsh invaded the southern half of Morrowind, capitalising on this disaster, and relentlessly they advanced and sacked Morrowind's capital city, Mournhold, the jewel of the province. Whilst the Argonian horde was eventually repulsed by the Redoran forces, the damage had been done, and the southern half of Morrowind lay in ruin. 200 years later, in the time of Skyrim, the province still hasn't fully recovered from these disasters, which destroyed the state's economy and military, making it one of the weakest provinces. In the 4th tier, we have 2 provinces equally weighted in their power: Valenwood and Elsewhere. Both of these provinces are of course part of the Oldmo Dominion, but we are considering their power separately, without Dominion influence, of course. The Dominion organises and runs each province, so without the Dominion, each province would likely have little organisation or internal structure, obviously making them weaker, and arguably both these provinces haven't ruled themselves fully internally for a considerable time, since before the Dominion they were ruled by the Empire for hundreds of years. Little is known of Elsewhere and Valenwood's military strength. However, one would assume that as each province relies on the Dominion for protection, that they would have little more than a guard force for their own internal administration. Thus, each province would be fairly weak due to this reliance on the Somerset Isles for governance and protection, although economically, one would assume each province to be stable, and so they would both have the potential to build up sufficient armies and navies if they so wished. The harsh deserts and dense rainforests of Elsewhere and Valenwood respectively would also mean that each province would be hard to invade and occupy at any rate. In tier 3, as moderately stable and strong provinces, we have High Rock, Hammerfell and Skyrim. Each of these provinces boasts a talented military, and each province also has a stable economy, although arguably, due to the Skyrim Civil War, Skyrim could be the weakest out of these 3 here provinces. Little is known of High Rock, apart from the fact that it is still part of the Empire, and so presumably relies on its protection from its legions, and that the province is also stable. Also, we know the denizens of High Rock, the Bretons, are one of the most talented magic-using races on the continent, and so if push comes to shove, the Bretons would no doubt make use of this natural aptitude for magic against their enemies, although more often than not they'll actually just attack each other. High Rock's ruling families are characterised as often warring and feuding amongst themselves endlessly for power, so this would of course diminish their overall power. Adjacent to High Rock is of course Skyrim, a wealthy province with a robust army and stable economy. At least it would have this, if not for the civil war raging there. The reason I place this war-torn land as a mid-tier province is since Skyrim, if its civil unrest is quelled quickly, has the potential to quickly recuperate and build a large standing army as well as a navy due to its relatively robust economy and trade with the rest of the empire. Not to mention the fact that the Nords themselves are a hardy people and some of the most talented warriors on the continent reside in this province. Hammerfell, however, is arguably the strongest of these mid-tier provinces, possessing an incredibly talented military that was previously able to single-handedly fend off the might of the Old Merry Dominion, an entity arguably much larger and more powerful than Hammerfell. Whilst Hammerfell is made up of large, inhospitable deserts and may not boast a particularly powerful economy, its army is one of the most formidable in Tamriel, especially when it comes to defending their homeland. In the second tier, consisting of very strong provinces, we have Blackmarsh, which arguably has the potential to create an empire of its own in the future. This contrasts with the Argonians' typical role in Tamriel history of being the underdogs and slaves of other peoples, as under the leadership of the Amazileel and the influence of the Hist, the Argonians' organisation at present is almost unrivaled in Tamriel, and the Argonians themselves have become a formidable fighting force, destroying much of the Dunmer's homeland in their invasion at the beginning of the 4th era. The Hist imbues the Argonians with strength and warns the race of reptiles of any impending dangers, meaning that the Argonians are always prepared for disaster and are ready to act. An example of this would be the Oblivion Crisis, where the Argonians were so well prepared for the event due to the Hist's warning that they soundly defeated the Daedric forces and actually invaded Oblivion to the point where Dagon had to close all his Oblivion gates in Blackmarsh. This is a clear indication that due to the Argonian resilience and strength of will, they can seemingly bypass insurmountable obstacles and achieve feats never expected of them. Although that being said, Blackmarsh is an introverted province and nothing is known about how wealthy the Argonians are, and a robust economy and wealth is a massive factor when it comes to exerting prolonged military strength. In our highest first tier of the most powerful provinces, we have of course Cyrodiil and the Somerset Isles, respectively the driving forces of the Empire and the Old Merry Dominion. Cyrodiil possesses the most disciplined and largest army present on Tamriel, and it is also the wealthiest province on the continent, trading with many other provinces. Even at its weakest state, the Empire's military could repel the Old Merry Dominion's advances, testifying that the Imperials do indeed possess the continent's most powerful military, not necessarily due to tactics or equipment they possess, but due to sheer numbers. The Somerset Isles, on the other hand, have perhaps the most powerful navy present on Tamriel, which means that as it's an island province, it's incredibly hard to invade, especially compared to Cyrodiil, which is an expansive province with little natural defences. It should also be mentioned that the Isles can also field some of the most advanced spec ops on the continent, so what the High Elves lack in numbers, one could argue they make up for in prowess. Although the Isles do trade with Valenwood and Elsewhere at least, it's not not known if in the time of Skyrim the Isles are trading with any other nations, which would weaken them economically, especially compared to Cyrodiil. Cyrodiil, on the other hand, trades with a large range of other provinces, and possesses the Eastern Empire Trade Company, the richest trade organisation in Tamriel, which would indicate that Cyrodiil is economically superior. All in all, it is mostly a tie between Cyrodiil and the Sunset Isles for the title of most powerful province economically and militarily, although due to the Imperial Province's presumably superior economy and vaster military, Cyrodiil would thus be slightly more powerful, although we can't be sure. And it's also interesting to note that Black Marsh is a definite contender for the most powerful province, but due to the lack of information, we simply can't say. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching this video. If you want to see more, then feel free to check out all the other Elder Scrolls lore videos and discussion videos I have on my channel. Thanks again, and I'll see you. The nations of Akavir have invaded Tamriel numerous times, and Tamriel has returned the favour. But which continent in its entirety, taking into account the polities present on each, is more powerful? Could Tamriel carve itself an empire in Akavir, or will Akavir eventually annex Tamriel? To begin with, I'm going to give an overview of the state of each continent, before then moving off into discussing, in terms of military, which continent's people are stronger. In terms of strength, I'm going to assess this on how each continent would deal with the other continent invading it, just for simplicity's sake. So let's start with the continent we all know, Tamriel. Tamriel is a shadow of its former self. Politically and culturally, there are chasms to be found everywhere. The Empire only constitutes Hyrule, Cyrodiil and Skyrim, although I'm assuming here that the Imperials win the Civil War, as well as Morrowind, although Morrowind is basically independent. And then we have Black Marsh, which is governed by the mysterious Anzalil, a close-knit party of Argonians. Hammerfell too is now its own independent state, not associated with the Empire. And then obviously there is the Old Merry Dominion, which effectively controls Alinor, Valenwood and elsewhere. In the case of a mass invasion, one would assume that they would all band together to face a threat, although this may be a massive stretch. I can't really imagine the Old Merry Dominion rushing to aid the Empire. So how are we to decide the strength of Tamriel? It is a fractured continent, but one would hope that in the case of an invasion, they would all come together. But that isn't necessarily true to what would happen. So I'm inclined to consider Tamriel in two halves. I would assume that Hammerfell and the Anzalil of Black Marsh would ally themselves with the Empire if there was an invasion. The Dominion, however, would probably not get involved, or maybe even capitalise on the situation. Now let's consider Akavir. But before I begin, I want to point out that I've done a detailed lore video on Akavir, so you can watch that for a more in-depth look into the continent. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview here. Fundamentally, there are 4 races and polities present on Akavir. The Snow Demons of Kamal, the Seichi, the Tangmo, and the Tiger Dragons. These 4 kingdoms are completely separate, and they often fight each other, but collectively, they may be referred to as the Akaviri. I'll go through each kingdom now. The Tangmo are a species of monkey folk who are constantly oppressed by the other races on Akavir. They inhabit the central part of the continent, which is characterised by hundreds of tropical islands. While they can hold their own on the defensive, they are not a particularly militant people and tend to be rather docile. I think it's safe to say that they are the weakest nation of Akavir. The Kamal inhabits the northeastern side of Akavir. This section is much like Atmora. It's frozen over and sparsely populated. The Kamal themselves are described as primal snow demons and hibernate for the majority of the year. However, when they do thaw out, as they do every year, they will launch a full-scale assault on one of the other kingdoms of Akavir. More often than not though, they will attack the Tangmo. The Kamal are probably the most warlike species on Akavir. Once, in the Second Era, they even launched an invasion of northern Tamriel which resulted in Windhelm's sacking. However, the Ebonheart Pact managed to fight them off after a time and defeat them. Then we have the Tiger Dragon Empire, or Capotan. These tiger people are ruled by the divine Tosh Raka, the Tiger Dragon. Essentially, the Capotan have attempted to become dragons their entire existence, and apparently their leader has actually managed to do this. He is literally a dragon. The Capotan have had a feud with the Seichi, another kingdom on Akavir, and these two nations are considered the two most powerful on Akavir. However, it is said that in recent years, the Tiger Kingdom have ascended as the most powerful kingdom because of their armies, although their navy is not nearly as powerful as that of the Seichi. Talking about the Seichi, let's move on to them. They are a race of serpent people who have invaded Tamriel numerous times. At one point, there was even an Akaviri potentate, and the Seichi ruled the empire. But this was through assimilation rather than conquest. The invading force surrendered to the emperor at the time, and he granted them a sort of advisory position. But that's beside the point. The Seichi are the most contact with Tamriel. They've invaded the continent once, and Emperor Uriel V returned the favour in the Third Era, invading the Seichi kingdom of Akavir. They are the second most powerful of the kingdoms, and their military is certainly formidable. They have extremely powerful cavalry and have incredible discipline in their legions. The fact that by the end of the Third Era the descendants of the Seichi remnants were training nearly the entire Imperial army acts as testimony to their martial skills. But there is one fact that really acts as pure testimony to their sheer power. When Uriel V invaded Akavir with as large an army as he dared come out of Cyrodiil, he was soundly defeated by a Seichi army that, by all accounts, was barely even seen before they struck. If the Seichi are so powerful militarily, then one has to wonder, just how powerful is a Tiger Dragon Empire? It's kind of scary to think about. So which continent in the end is more powerful? Both seem pretty equally divided internally. The two most powerful polities of each continent basically detest each other, and they are engaged in a war. Although on Tamriel, this happens to be a cold war for now. But the Capotan and the Seichi clearly have superior militaries to the ones on Tamriel. But opposing this strength is the fact that the Kmal are hostile to anything that moves, and the Tangmo seem neutral and only attack if they are provoked. I should also add that the Tangmo are in an alliance with the Capotan, but we don't know in what capacity this is. Are they subservient to the Tigers? Do they contribute militarily? So as I said before, I'm going to approach this from the angle of how would each continent fare if the other one invaded. If the Seichi did invade Tamriel, then they would be destroyed at home by the Capotan, and vice versa of course. If the Kmal invaded Tamriel, they would probably be defeated like last time, and the Tangmo would never invade anyway, as they seem one of the weakest races on Akavir. They are mostly treated as slaves. But if the Seichi managed to invade and there were no consequences in Akavir for them, it would be a moot point as to whether they would succeed. Could the combined forces of the Empire, Hammerfell and Argonia stop them? Obviously I'm not including the Dominion here, I can't really imagine them helping. I think that taking into account the last invasion was defeated, it's likely that the Seichi would not succeed. The Capotan on the other hand might be a different matter altogether. If they were to invade, perhaps with the aid of the monkey people, they could perhaps bring the civilizations of Tamriel to their knees, although the Dominion and Empire would probably put up a valiant fight against them. But what if the people of Tamriel invaded Akavir? At this point, I'm going to assume that either the Empire or the Dominion is invading by itself. I believe that such an invasion by either party would end in disaster. It wouldn't matter if the invasion force is a Thalmor one or an Imperial one. Both the elves and men are fairly equally matched on Tamriel, and all history has proven that at the height of its power, the Empire was barely able to dent the Seichi kingdom. So my final verdict is that the nations of Akavir are militarily superior to those on Tamriel. I definitely think that they are more powerful, but because of the internal strife on both continents I don't think that they will be coming into contact anytime soon, and who knows, in 50 years the peoples of Tamriel may have united and be strong enough to take on and defeat the Epidemic. Ultimately though, all of this is speculative. You may have a completely different interpretation to me and think everything I've said is just complete bollocks. But if that's the case, or if you even agree, then feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Anyway, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one. The Elder Scrolls games seem to have pretty good antagonists, not just in terms of main antagonists, but secondary villains too. But each game has a completely different main villain. I think it's pretty hard to speculate who or what the next one will be. However, in this video, I'm going to be going through a few ideas for the next antagonist, dependent on where the game is set. Personally, I strongly hope that the next game will be set in the Somerset Isles. I won't go into why here, but I do have a video on this topic. It's entirely possible that the Thalmor could act as the next main antagonist. This would be completely out, but at the same time it's likely that the Thalmor could be secondary antagonists like the Imperials or Stormcloaks in Skyrim. But I think there's a main theme with all the antagonists in the Elder Scrolls. Their plans usually transcend normal matters. They don't simply want power or a throne. Usually, the villains have plans that encompass Nirn. A few examples could be Mehrunes Dagon, Yeagar Tharn, and Dagoth Ur. The Thalmor could easily fit this archetype, because they literally want to destroy humanity. I can definitely see the Thalmor working as the primary antagonists. If the game was set on the Isles, it'd be pretty epic if this was the Thalmor's last stand and you were sort of inside agent attempting to bring the organisation down from within. Anyway, because we know so little about the organisation of the Thalmor currently, I think it's definitely viable for the antagonist to be the head of that order. It fits with the idea that we don't really know a lot about the next game's antagonist in the previous game. This seems to be a sort of recurring theme with each game. I guess that this sort of antagonism could be present in another province too though, such as Hammerfell or Valenwood, where the natives or the Empire are fighting the Thalmor, and your eventual objective is to bring down their regional commander, kind of like the Skyrim Civil War. The only problem with any of these ideas is that they would make the antagonist a normal elf. In the past, the antagonists have always been incredibly powerful, like a Daedric prince, or modified somewhat like Dagoth Ur, who was an elf turned god, so they're usually not their original species anymore. That being said, Yeagar Tharn was the antagonist in Arena, and he was human, albeit a very powerful one. It could work if the Thalmor were the main antagonists, if the head of their organisation had undergone some sort of mutation, or had attempted to reach godhood, sort of like Ancano, but times 100. Hammerfell is my next favoured location for the Elder Scrolls 6, purely because it is now its own state. It would be interesting to see what a province independent from the Empire is like. But in terms of antagonists, it's pretty likely the Thalmor would play some sort of role, as I said before. I think they could implement something unique to Hammerfell, which could somehow be related to the Yakudans of yore, the progenitors to the Redguards. For example, the antagonists might have rediscovered the ability to sword sing and are attempting to conquer Hammerfell. Alternatively, it could be the player who discovers how to sword sing and they are using their ability to beat back some sort of Daedric plot. Either way, I think that if it wasn't Hammerfell, it'd be cool if there was an element of ancient Yakudan lore, some sort of ancient evil that has come back to haunt the Redguards. Maybe the left-handed elves could make a return. If you want to learn more about ancient Yakuza and the Sword Singers, then I have videos on both respective topics. A couple of years ago, there was a supposed leak of the next Elder Scrolls plot. We now know that it's definitely fake, but I think the made up plot for the next game has some good ideas. I think the Anzai Leal, the ruling party of Black Marsh, should be integral to any plot set in the region. I think it would be a bit far for the Anzai Leal to be completely demonized. It could be that a sect or that even one Argonian within the party has become corrupt and seeks to take over Argonia, perhaps uniting the country to attack Morrowind or the Empire for the sake of revenge. Perhaps the corrupted leader or member of the Anzai Leal wishes to enslave Argonia to his or her will and join with the Thalmor to take over the rest of Tamriel. A sort of poetic justice for the prejudice and hate the Argonians have suffered over the past hundreds of years. I think such a struggle against the plot would be pretty epic and would add a new dynamic to the Cold War between the Empire and Old Merry Dominion. It would be from a sort of third perspective. Valenwood has been another section of Tamriel that many people want to be the setting of the next game. The stuff I said before about a Thalmor plot rings true here too, but perhaps even more so, as it said the Old Merry are ethnically cleansing Valenwood in the 4th era. A plot could revolve around this attempt at mass genocide. Equally, the antagonist could be a being who wants to destroy the Green Pact that the Wood Elves adhere to, thus effectively destroying their civilization. High Rock, I think, is a hard setting to speculate about in terms of antagonists. Recently there was the invasion of Wayrest by pirate corsairs, but that was because the idiotic king decided to completely open the ports, including to pirates. There could always be some sort of plot revolving around the warring Breton kingdoms, but I think that would be pretty bland to say the least. A character in Morrowind called Loris Serrano comments that there are rumours that Akavir is making preparations to invade again, and that they are only waiting for some sort of crisis, such as a civil war, before they invade. He later comments that he wishes that some sort of Dunmerry hero could go over to Akavir and stop it. Interestingly, the Nerevarine does go over to Akavir. It could be to prevent the invasion. I think an Akaviri invasion would be extremely exciting. Perhaps such an invasion might unite the provinces of Tamriel, bar the Somerset Isles of course. Then, when the invasion is over, all the 8 unified provinces might turn on the 9th. I think that would be a pretty cool plotline, and I guess it could take place in almost any province in Tamriel. These have just been my ideal ideas for antagonists in the provinces that haven't been covered yet. Please feel free to include your own suggestions in the comment section below.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Skyrim. My name's Camel, and more importantly, welcome back to the Curating Curious Curiosities series for a long-awaited new episode. In this video today, I will be curating to you the curious curiosities that can be found within Blackreach. Before we get cracking, timestamps for each of the curiosities in this video can be found down in the description and in the comments. Now down there in the description you can also find links to my other Curating Curious Curiosities videos and to my social media. Be sure to check all of that out. So Blackreach, or as it was once known in the Dormaris tongue, Fal Zadam Din, which translates to the Blackest Kingdom Reaches. It's a massive Dwemer city located within a colossal natural cavern far beneath the surface of Skyrim. The air is thick with ephemeral spores and floating specks of unknown origin dancing through the dense cavern air. Many giant glowing mushrooms grow throughout the cavern, providing natural lighting, painting Blackreach with an ethereal blue brush. There is a teal fog that haunts Fal Zadam Din, thick with color and arcane particles. making it hard for one to grasp the true size of Blackreach, blanketing the cavern in even more mystery. This mist, mixed with the occasional electric glow of a strange Dwemer structure, sets an almost neon stage, creating a futuristic yet simultaneously ancient setting, with lively magical properties yet also deathly desolate and forgotten elements of a strange and archaic society, the Dwemer. But why does Blackreach exist? It was originally colonized by the Dwemer once they discovered a considerable source of Ethereum down here. It's a natural mineral which bears notable magical properties. The Dwemer built 4 cities to harness the full potential of this Ethereum. Arkanthums, which served as a command center and the primary research center. Betharzel was a city that's purpose at this time is currently unknown. Mazulft was used as a storage site, and Raldebathar, which would deal with the mining operations. Strangely, the Ethereum Forge located at the city of Bethalft was not part of the Alliance, or attached to Blackreach, but it was used to process the Ethereum into exorbitantly powerful artifacts. At first, the Ethereum Alliance was successful, the 4 cities bringing peace, harmony, and scientific and technological advancement to the Dwemer. However, after 3 years, just 3 years, the 4 cities began to want independent control over the Ethereum Forge, and the incredible items of power it could create. This conflict was known as the Ethereum Wars. What is left? Well, what is left is Blackreach. An almost unbelievable sight for any traveler, explorer, or scholar that intentionally or accidentally finds their way here. A location that can be very intense and overwhelming at times, but that is why I love it, because for once it's a dungeon that beats you, rather than you beating it. Though for this reason a lot of players have not fully explored Blackreach and discovered all of its strange and wonderful secrets, and that is why we are gathered here today, to safely and fully explore this great ancient city, Blackreach. So without further hesitation, let the curation begin. Now the second we exit the Alftand Cathedral and enter Blackreach, we'll be met by something quite interesting, a Dwemer ballista mounted on the wall. It's loaded and ready to go. We'll see that it can be activated with this here lever. Upon doing so, it will release all 3 dwarven ballista bolts, launching them directly at the door of this house just across the way. Why on Nern there would be a Dwemer ballista aimed right at the door of a house? Now that is genuinely curious. Maybe this was set here during the Ethereum Wars and designed as a surprise attack. Knock knock, who's there? 3 Dwemer ballista bolts through your chest as you open the door in the morning to get your mail. Haha, classic Dwemer joke. All jests aside, a heavy artillery device pointed at the door of a house is very strange indeed, almost as if whatever was inside was a great threat. So moving over to the house in which the ballista was aimed at, we'll see there is a dwarven sphere waiting right in front of the door. Again, why such security? It seems at the very least that this sphere has been posted here, or has been alarmed to a threat nearby, which we would assume is within the house, and that's backed up by the ballista being pointed directly at the door. Now this house is known as Sindorion's Field Laboratory, a name that might sound familiar to you. Inside there is a wide array of varying items that will capture our interest. Over on one side there is a laboratory part of the interior, with clusters and bunches of a multitude of strange and rare alchemical ingredients. There are books too for arcane study, and an enchanting table, and an alchemy bench. Their purposes are obvious, of course, but by far the alchemical ingredients outweigh any other items, therefore suggesting that whoever lived here was an alchemist, and quite an advanced alchemist by the looks of things. Now, over on the other side of this house, we'll find a bedroom, but more interestingly, a skeleton, lying on the ground with 3 dwarven arrows sticking out of its back. This is the skeleton of Sindorion. On him we can find his journal, which recounts his journey to Blackreach in pursuit of the Crimson Nernroot, a plant that only grows within Blackreach. We'll also notice that the journal entry was made only 142 years before the events of Skyrim. So Sindorion was definitely not a Dwemer, as they vanished roughly 4,000 years before the events of Skyrim. But we do actually know who Sindurion is, or was. As in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, he was the ultimate alchemist that gave us the quest to collect Nirnroot. And if you thought that that quest was annoying, well, Sindurion's come back to haunt you, as after reading his journal, we'll get a quest to collect 30 Crimson Nirnroot, and return them to the Sarathi sisters in Riften, who we've taken a look at before, in the 10 things you didn't need to know about Skyrim. Okay, but now let's get back to the present. He has 3 dwarven arrows in him, so he was killed by dwarven arrows. Outside the house, there is a dwarven sphere who has a crossbow on one of his arms. This, however, shoots dwarven bolts and not dwarven arrows. So while I feel that the dwarven sphere was placed outside this house and meant to suggest that it was the one that shot dwarven arrows into Sindurion, it doesn't actually line up, as again, these dwarven spheres don't shoot arrows, they shoot bolts. And if the dwarven sphere is here to kill him and succeeded, then this happened no more than 142 years ago. So, who set up the ballista bolt aimed directly at the door of the laboratory, and why? It's a pretty strange collection of findings here, and a death that doesn't really quite line up. But one thing's for sure, he gave someone the Crimson Nirnroot quest, and they rage quit and killed him. Hell, he might have even shot himself in the back just to put himself out of the misery of the Crimson Nirnroot. And while that is physically impossible, some people go to great lengths when trying to escape the ring of a Nirnroot. Now this is an uncommon but present sight within Blackreach, a Dwemer dwelling that has fallen over the millennia, rendered unenterable by rubble and destruction of the surrounding foundations. It's sad that we don't get to explore more of these dwarven homes to see how the Dwemer lived, but there is one more home we can explore much later on in the video. Now just to the east of Sindurion's field laboratory, we have the Falmer pump station. There is a small ditch with stairs leading down into it. This appears to have once been some sort of pumping station node or something of the sort. But now there is a Falmer that stands guard here, and also a few Chorus Reaper pods. It's likely this Falmer is making sure these Reapers grow to a full healthy size. He's probably some kind of incubation overseer. Now just up above this plumbing pit, glued to the cavern wall, is the giant glowing mushroom. And while big glowing mushrooms are very common in Blackreach, this is the actual alchemical ingredient named glowing mushroom. Now this one is also a whopping 20 times larger than the standard glowing mushroom size, as we can see here with the player character next to it. This is one hell of a fungal infection, so be sure to protect your toenails while coming to visit. Next, just to the northwest of Sindurion's field laboratory, we have the Deep Mist Crossing. Here we'll observe several waterfalls slowly falling from the stone cavern ceiling and walls. The source of all of this water is unknown, but it does supply all of the waterways we find within Blackreach. A gorgeous sight when the mist sprays and the soft neon glow of the mushrooms mix into a dancing cloud of ethereal vapors. Vape-natio! Anyway, there appears to be a lot of rocks and such in the body of water. There are also these stone posts with metal rings, suggesting that there was once a bridge or crossing here. Along with the rocks, we'll also find various pieces of rubble with Dwemer markings on them, pointing to the notion that there was once a bridge or something of the sort here. That bridge's time has long passed, and now all that remains are the blue washed bones of its structure. I could be right, or I could just be bridging gaps in information. Oh, and just to top this one off, weirdly, underneath the ground, there's another one of these stone posts. Why it's 10 feet underground? I don't know. If you do know, be sure to make a post about it. Next up, we have the Reeking Tower tucked away in the northern corner of Blackreach. As we approach, a huge carve out in the rock face will be presented, layered in thick gossamer webbing, a deep moat of silk surrounding the towering island in the middle. This island houses the Reeking Tower. Now just outside the tower entrance there is a glowing blue rock, and while it's not confirmed at all, by studying all accounts, an educated deduction of the information would land on the conclusion that this is, or at least these glowing rocks found within Blackreach are, actually raw Ethereum deposits. But that's enough speculation for now. Let us enter the reeking tower. As we ascend up the twisting tower passages, we'll find many signs of spiders, and soon enough, some actual spiders. No surprises really. Towards the top of the tower, there is a ramped room with spiders, spider eggs, and a chest tucked away behind a curtain of webbing. There is also an elevator that will take us to the top. As soon as we reach the surface once more, we'll be met by a desiccated corpse, wrapped up and digesting in poisonous enzymatic fang fluids. Just over the lip of the stairs is a giant spider waiting for its next victim, which will not be me. Moving around the corner behind the wall, there is another spider waiting for more food. Again, I'm not on the menu. And just for all the spider lovers out there is another third giant spider waiting in the web towards the ceiling and will drop down, giving you a fright while you eat your curds and whey, like Little Miss Muffet. Now, something odd I've found here are these cocooned up victims. The cocoons are massive, several times larger than the player character. So I genuinely cannot think as to what is in these cocoons. And while there are several unexpected creatures to be found in Blackreach, which we'll run into later on, which of them would make sense to fill up a large cocoon? I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, this place absolutely stinks, so let's move away from the reeking tower. Nestled away in a small lull in the land, there is a tiny Falmer village. There are 2 huts, but only one Falmer standing out in the middle of the small village. Perhaps his friends are out doing chores, finding some more mushrooms to grill. There is also a Chorus Reaper pod here, so be careful of that. But most importantly, there is a little wooden rack with fish on it, revealing to us that this is a little Falmer fisherman. And he must be quite a catch to all the Falmer ladies out there. But for now though, we'll reel ourselves in and move on to the next curiosity. As we make our way through the rocks and mushrooms of Blackreach, as we approach the open at the water's edge, we'll be met by ephemerally flickering balls of an ethereal light, dancing and gliding through the dense cavern air. Wisps. 3 of them. And to anyone who has played a lot of Skyrim, we all know what 3 wisps means. But there is a wisp mother somewhere around here. And sure enough, up she'll pop, and bloody hell, apparently I have a particular mod installed, taking Wisp Mother to another level. Okay, so now that the 2 biggest distractions are out of the picture, what is a Wisp Mother doing down here, all the way underground in Blackreach? Well, given we don't really know the origins of wisps or Wisp Mothers, it's quite hard to say how they got down here, when we don't know where they come from anyway. Some theories suggest that Wisp Mothers are the ghosts of snow elves and that the wisps are lost souls. Other theories suggest that Wisp Mothers are necromancers that sought after immortality through undeath. No theory is proven or disproven, so take your pick. But we do know that they can't yell. All they can do is wisp. Now just up the hill we have a rather strange and unique find. There are several stone stairs leading up from the dirt area where we met the wisps to some higher ground. Then following the pathway at the top, we'll be led through a beautifully lit passageway in the rocks. Peppered and showered with stunning glowed mushrooms, we'll soon come out onto a small walkway that leads to a circular platform in the middle of the water. From here, there are 2 large pipes leading to a stone block on the edge of the water. There are a number of hatches and covers on this, their purpose unknown, but they all have a slightly different design. And the actual purpose of this entire setup is also unknown. But it is a very elaborate and strange sight. So many pipes leading here and there with vents, tubes, hatches and valves sprouting out of the stone like the mushrooms that surround this very spot. Centered right underneath the circular platform that sits up above the water, there is actually a water intake. At first I was unsure as to what this was, but later on in the video we'll see this exact same model half submerged with splashing water, suggesting that it is in fact a water intake. So the water is being taken and processed in some way through this tonal valve station. Where the water is going and what the water is then doing, that is currently unknown. I guess you could say it's just another drop in the sea of curiosities down here in Blackreach. Next, we have the bad real estate found just behind Sindorian's field laboratory that we saw earlier. Lurking in the shadows, there is an abandoned Falmer hut. I'm assuming it was abandoned because there is no Falmer here, nor are there any signs of a Falmer living here recently. And just next door, we have another piece of terrible real estate. Another Dwemer dwelling that has been caved in and collapsed over the years. And next to this is where the Falmer has actually chosen to live, in a little Dwemer pavilion. While it's not the ideal place to live, in these hard times, you have to choose the best place you can afford. And just up the road from this Falmer, we have the Guardian of the Northeast. Here we will find a Dwemer Centurion station, where, as one might expect, there is a Dwarven Centurion sleeping, waiting to be deployed. It would appear the Dwemer placed this here as a roadside security measure. There is also a chest right next to this hulking construct, which will of course contain random leveled loot. On the other side we have a switch, which when activated will boot up the Centurion so it's ready for combat. It's strange to have a switch-initiated Dwarven Centurion. I feel like it's kind of archaic, which is ironic as this particular contraption is just that, archaic. But for the Dwemer, I feel like they could have a more elaborate, technologically advanced system of deploying security measures rather than having to physically pull a lever. But once it is activated, naturally, it will be a little stained off. Now, just across the road from the poor area, we have the prime real estate. Unlike those shabby shanties across the way, this is some top shelf housing right here. An old Dwemer tower of some kind is now the viewing ground for these Falmer. There are also 2 chairs where we can sit and observe the vast cavernous abyss before us in all its glory. There is also a chest here which will contain random level loot, soon to contain all of the rubies that I'll need for rolling through my fingers while I throw my head back and cackle from this position of dominance and wealth. Ha 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 ha. Now down on the ground level of this very same structure and around the back we have the shadow shrouded stash. It is tucked away and in a rather obscure area if you really think about it. I mean, sure, a chest is used to keep loot safe, but it's not exactly protected down here. It seems quite open to anyone just wandering around and taking some stuff from it. Makes me think it may have been here as some kind of deposit box in which anyone would and could drop stuff into it or take stuff from it. I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of this obscure yet open chest is. It seems to go against the purpose of a treasure chest. I guess you could say that it's quite a cache. C-A-C-H-E that is. And that joke is definitely funnier when written down. Even then, it may cause instant fatality. And just like my humor, we have another fungal intrigue to inspect, as at this very same tower around the other side from the chest, just off to the south of the wonderful balcony we observed just a minute ago, we can find the mushroom Namira's Rot, except this one is the largest in the game. It's 3 times the size of a normal Namira's Rot. As we can see here with the player character in shot for a size comparison, what has made this super big, well, I mean, if there's a place for it, surely it's Blackreach. While it's not a mind-blowing size like with the giant mushroom we saw earlier, it is still quite impressive. And 3 times the mushroom equals 3 times the fun. You know what I'm saying? Yes, that's right, 3 times the mushroom risotto. Or for the Falmer, 3 times the blindness. Now this next curiosity really got my attention. So again, at the very back of this very same tower, there is a large stone arch resting next to the building. It took me a minute, but straight away there was something very strange about this particular stone pillar. Have you spotted it yet? The pattern on it. It's not Dwemer. The pattern on it is of a Nordic origin. So we have a giant piece of stone here, either from an ancient Nordic ruin or was carved by the lords of old, or perhaps even the Atmorans. I can also confirm that this is the only piece of rock down here in Blackreach that boasts Nordic patterns, or seems to be of Nordic origin, which would suggest that there never was a Nordic ruin or Nordic culture down here at any point. And just for comparison, the pattern on Dwemer ruins appears to be much broader and bolder, whereas the Nordic patterns are smaller and more intricate. And of course we see this exact stonework in abundance throughout the many ancient Nordic burial sites found throughout Skyrim. So what is this doing down here? Well, the Atmorans came to Skyrim during the Merethic era, and Blackreach was colonized by the Dwemer during the First era. So there is definitely some crossover time periods there. Maybe the Atmorans / ancient Nords came down here, made a pillar, then bailed, although that is an absolutely ridiculous explanation. Maybe they came down here and worked with the Dwemer. But why do we not see more signs of Nordic presence in Blackreach? Why just this one arch? Maybe this piece fell down from a Nordic ruin high above the ceiling of Blackreach that was built into the ground, and as they dug deeper and deeper and built deeper and deeper, they pierced through the ceiling accidentally, and this section of that Nordic ruin fell down into Blackreach. Again, it sounds pretty goofy, and of course if you look up, there's no signs of any Nordic ruin up there. So how did this Nordic stone arch get into Blackreach? I truly do not know. No theory really adds up more than any of the other theories. I guess when it comes to Blackreach, it's just another story arch. Now, just behind this tower that we've been at for the past 5 minutes, there is a small cove tucked away in a corner and veiled by a depression in the stone ceiling. These are the stairs of Asininity. They lead up from this small pond and into dead ends. There's nothing up here. Stairs that lead to nothing. They really do live up to their name. There is also a Crimson Nirnroot and a Chorus Reaper pod here, which doesn't help explain why these stairs lead up to small little cupboard-sized rooms that have no seemingly apparent purpose. Your help in solving this would be much appreciated. Moving back towards the center, we have the Fungal Field Courtyard. It's an area that seems to serve no purpose, but has a great wall built around one side, and the largest paved area in all of Blackreach, apart from the Silent City, which we'll get to much later on. So it seems pointless, but it is a wondrous, effervescent luminescence showering down from the fields of brilliant mushrooms. It doesn't seem to serve any purpose other than just being wholesomely eye-pleasing. Maybe the Dwemer were growing these mushroom forests for a reason. Maybe it's just their version of having a park in a city. It would be a lovely place to sit down, but there are no seats. I guess you'd have to pull up a stool. A toadstool. Now, just next to this mushroom field, we have the Twin Tower Gate. This appears to be some kind of watchtower, maybe? It's like a barracks of some kind, where guards can keep an eye out and keep the peace from a good height. Although it may have had some other purpose that isn't clear upon first inspection. As if we head around the back, there is a path that leads up to the other side, and all along it, there are these pipes protruding out of the ground. They would appear to be vents of some kind, although the tops of them are sealed. Quite curious as to what the purpose could be, or more, what's below here that requires vent pipes coming out of the ground. But there is something much more interesting here. Something that, quite appropriately, dwarfs all other curiosities around in the Dwarven City. A monolithic fungi that took the phrase, "sky's the limit," a little too literally. This is what I call the Mother Mushroom. An absolute behemoth. The biggest mushroom in the entire game of Skyrim, and even the biggest I've ever seen in all of the Elder Scrolls games. It's so monstrous, it makes those Telvanni mushroom towers look like mere pizza toppings in comparison. I would guess that this is the mushroom that started it all. The OG shroom that gave birth to all the other mushrooms in this cavern. We'll even see it's got these reaching tentacles fondling for foundation to grip into the earth and spread its glowing infection. It is bedazzling to behold, flirtatiously blinding to stare at. The ephemeral flickers of bioluminescence leave us with our jaws on the floor. It truly is something special. It appears to have a completely rigid stem as well. If we look at the other giant mushroom next to it, we'll see that the smaller one sways back and forth, suggesting that its stem is more flexible, whereas the mother mushroom stays in place and projects its stability and position within Blackreach, implying that it is far more ancient than any other fungi down here. Truly a sight to see, and one that we can see from just about anywhere within the cavern of Fal Zardam Din. In fact, it's so stunning that it really doesn't leave much room for further discussion. Yes, now moving back over next to the Wisp Mother, we have the wooden bridge, a curiosity that has actually got me confused. So what do we have? We have a poorly built bridge made of wooden planks. Okay, cool. Who built this? Well, definitely not the Dwemer. They don't use wood, and we'll also find other bridges in Blackreach that are great stone structures. So if not the Dwemer who built this, well, we know that there are a number of travelers and others who have found Blackreach over the millennia, so it could be any of them. There are also populations of Falmer down here, so it could have been them as well. But what has me particularly confused is what it's made from. Wood. As mentioned, the Dwemer didn't use wood in their building, so the wood wasn't scavenged from an already existing structure in Blackreach, and there are of course no trees in Blackreach. So the only explanation is that someone carried planks of wood all the way down into Blackreach just to build a crummy bridge. The effort to reward ratio is too off for me. We best leave it, as someone important may have